This Choircast podcast is brought to you by the book Sitting in the Shade of Another Tree. For too long, people of faith have focused more on pointing out where other religions get it wrong. But what if we decided to focus more on all the ways those other religions get it right? This path might end up leading us into deeper understanding, connection, friendship, and peace. Sitting in the Shade of Another Tree, from Choir Publishing and Patheos, available now on Amazon.
Welcome to the Unbelief Podcast, your journey, actually our journey together beyond inherited beliefs to a spirituality that works for you. I'm your host, Jeremy. I'm a deep skeptic, also a pastor. We can fix that later, right? No?
You've reached another Smarty Pants episode of the Unbelief Podcast, and today we're interviewing author and public theologian Brian Mclaren on his book Life After Doom. We did this interview a little while ago, but right now, at this moment, it feels incredibly poignant. And just a little note about this recording, something weird was happening with my audio, but I really feel like this interview is worth hearing either way. So just look forward to a better version of my voice in the future.
Life After Doom is the book, and it's talking about what we are all experiencing, the polycrisis, right? Yeah. All of the things, all of the time. Every time you turn on, there's another war or conflict, or the earth is going to catch fire, or whatever. So, Brian, the other thing is a lot of my content is religious, but for people who don't church, right? Yeah. So, and I know that you have done a whole lot of books that are religious. Is this one of those books? Do you feel like this is also a religious book?
Yeah, this is I think this book is deeply spiritual, but it's written for everybody. It's actually not written for everybody. If you're a person, if a person thinks that climate change is a hoax and is happy that more and more wealth goes to a fewer and fewer, smaller and smaller percentage of people, and that they use that wealth to buy social media channels so they can influence public opinion as well as buy politicians. If you're
it's okay not
with all that, it's not for you. But if you're paying attention to reality, if you are part of the reality-based community, I'm especially writing this book for people who already feel the overwhelm and they're trying to think, what am I going to do about this? And because what a lot of us find is that our brain wants to do one of two things. And there's all kinds of psychological research behind this. Our brain either wants to go into denial and just have a sort of happy optimism. It'll all work out. We'll find a solution. We've solved every problem in the past, or else they go to complete despondency and despair. There's nothing we can do. It's too late. And the interesting thing about both of those extremes is they allow us to give up and not do anything. Right. And what I'm trying to help people do is to cope with disturbing information, but to do it in a way that helps them keep going. And what's interesting about that, Jeremy, and because I love your content, I think you resonate with this, but so often right now, religion is part of the problem. It's not only part of the problem. 100%. It's a major, major source of the problem. It is. The irony is we need people to help us go deep and find things like virtue and commitment and ethical framework to live in some difficult and challenging times. So we need the best of religion to show up, and the best of science, and the best of business, and the best of technology. We kind of need the best people to show up and work together. And that means that for a guy like me, I was a pastor for 24 years, and I've got all kinds of, as you do, problems with conventional religion. But I want the best of religion to show up and the best of sciences. So that's what we need. Yeah,
absolutely. So talking with Brian Mclaren. He and I both survived the rapture today that was happening apparently during the eclipse. And I like the word that you just used, right? The overwhelm, right? That everything is coming apart all at the same time. And we don't even know how to cope and what to do. And so, like an investigative journalist that is not, an expert in the field he's investigating, journalists are experts in investigation and in like putting those things together. And that's really what you're doing for us in this book. You did the hard work and you have put stuff together in of how we deal with life after doom, with all of the poly crisis. And so, I'm curious, when you're writing this book, Brian, like, what are you hoping this book does for people?
Yeah. Well, one of the main contributions of the book, as I was, just jumping in over my head in all of the discrete different fields, everything from how does the ice system work? They call it the cryosphere. And how does our normal planetary climate, how is it normally stabilized? And how do the ocean's currents work? To understanding how huge amounts of wealth and power are flowing to the Elon Musks and these folks in the world. As I was grappling with that, I realized I needed somebody to help me sort through possible scenarios. So one of the things the book will do for people is it paints 4 possible scenarios of where things could go. And all of them involve disruption. Some of them involve destruction.
Right. Okay. Good.
And so I think that then as soon as you understand that, then you say, okay, how can we live and behave through this disruption that will help us survive and have the best life we can and contribute away from destruction to a better possible future. So that what I hope people will get is a sense, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how it's going to turn out. I know how I want to show up. And that's what I hope people will get.
You have been writing for a long time. And I'm just going to keep you on as long until you fall asleep. But I will tell you, the first book of yours that actually was truly life-changing to me was, it might have been your first big selling book. I'm not sure, but it's called, I just lost the Christian. A new kind of Christian. Yeah. Right. And it was in the moment when the idea of postmodernism was very dramatic, and it's in a narrative form that really helps you process as a person who is feeling these feelings of what postmodernity is. And that was a good book. It was like part of a trilogy. The real good book, the one that I would say that if anybody is on here and you want to read a book about whatever happens after this, the last word and the word after that, like that, I can get emotional just thinking about it. So that one, another great one is Generous Orthodoxy. That is a super amazing book. I want to know, out of all the probably around 1,000 whatever books you've written, is there one of those for you that has sort of a special place in your heart? You're like, man, that book, I always come back to it. I was like, I'm really glad. Obviously, this book, the book Life After Doom, but besides this book, in the past, which one is the thing for you?
So I've written a lot of books, like over 20. But that book, The Last Word and the Word After That, was a very touching book to write because I heard from people, like I heard amazing stories from people, who were really helped by that. The middle book in that trilogy, it was called The Story We Find Ourselves In, was probably my favorite book I'd written up till that point. Right. And I just felt I was able to have some breakthroughs in my own theological thinking and reconstruction and so on. I wrote a book in 2007 or 2008 that was called Everything Must Change. And that was the book that I wrote that changed life the most, because I started that book with a question. The question was, what are the biggest problems in the world? And this Life After Doom in many ways builds on what a project that I started then to really try to understand how the world works, And
it does sort of feel like a child or a sequel of that Everything Must Change book.
Yeah. But I'll tell you, probably my favorite book in many ways is a little short book called The Galapagos Islands, A Spiritual Journey. And I actually was paid to go and spend some time in the Galapagos Islands and write
I'm really sorry for that, Brian.
Yeah,
I'm sorry you had to go through that.
It's such a tough assignment, but it was really one of the funnest things. I love the Galapagos Islands, but I got to write about things that nobody was going to ask me to write about unless it was there. So it really, that was one of my favorite things I've done.
Yeah. As I was thinking about all the books sort of in your catalog, a lot of the people that I talk with here on TikTok are people who are in like really deep deconstruction. And I've probably read 20 or 30 comments today of people who have said on my videos, like, I pulled the string and everything unraveled, and I've got a pile of string on the floor. I don't know what to do. Like, you've got this book, Faith After Doubt.
Yes.
That I think we will get back to Life After Doom, but could you just, for people here, what is faith after doubt?
Yes. Well, if a person is in that deconstruction process, I went through it myself while I was a pastor, which is tough, because
same.
Yeah, you understand. Yeah. And I was lucky enough that I didn't get fired, and that a whole lot of people in my congregation were going through this journey too. So, from my experience with them and a bunch of research I've done over the years, I tried to offer a schema of 4 stages that people seem to go through. Now, you could turn that into 8 stages or 16 stages, but 4 gives it enough clarity.
Right. Yeah.
And those stages are simplicity, complexity, perplexity, and harmony or solidarity. And what I'm so happy I got to write that book, because it's really helped. It's given me a chance to help a lot of people and be in fascinating conversations, the kind you're having every day as well. And as you know, there's an awful lot of people out there going through this. And something, if I could just say to anyone who's in the middle of this deconstruction process, it will be challenging, it will be rewarding, and it will be worth it. But you have to remember, when you get through it, if you can think of 4 stages, right? You get to that 4th stage. Eventually, that will become a new 1st stage, and you'll go through the process again. It's not something you're ever done with, but it's something that becomes kind of joyful, really, as you go along. But here's the thing. I hope people remember 10 years from now that there's a 14 or a 24 or a 44-year-old person who is just beginning the process. And that's going to be the case for the rest of our lives. People will be where you once were, and don't be impatient with them. Just understand it's in the air. It depends. It's happening to people all the time. And by the way, not just in one religion. I was with a Hindu teacher over the weekend, a Swami from a movement in Hinduism, and we had breakfast the other morning, and he was telling me, people are going through the same thing in his tradition, same kind of process.
Yeah. And I think that book is really helpful. And what you point there is something that I try to keep telling people. Part of the problem of like high control religious streams like evangelical Christianity and others is that one of the fundamental principles that you were taught explicitly and implicitly is that you just believe X, right? Yes. And there's this belief, and there's this like criticism of doubt. And what happens is like you are taught to ignore different new data.
Yes.
And there's like backlog of data. And so in the rest of your life, you don't do this. A new piece of data comes in, you look at it, you analyze it, you see if it fits, if it not, if you need to change as a result of that, right? And you do that over and over again. But what happens is if you have not been doing that, you've got this backlog and it can feel overwhelming.
That's a good way to say it. Yeah.
And you're going to have to take each one of those pieces out and you have to look at them, and you might have 10, 20, 40, 50 years of those. But the good news is, like, that's what you're doing is what you've got to do every day for the rest of your life. Right.
Yes. And the wonderful thing is, if you make the first change, and like there is one change that makes all the other changes easier. And that change is to change your attitude toward change, and to change your attitude toward thinking and doubting. And in a certain sense, it involves, for people who are religious and they believe in God, the big thing is to ask this question: is God, would the best version of God available want you to be dishonest, or appreciate your courage to be honest?
Right.
And if you can just accept that the best version of God that would be out there, that God would want you to be sincere and honest and not pretend to go along with things, and wouldn't want God's representatives to go around saying, agree with me or you'll burn forever. Right. I mean, that's the very opposite of honesty. That's using fear rather than a desire for the truth and threats. In a courtroom, that's called action under duress. And people need freedom to ask questions they need to ask. So
and you're going to do that for the rest of your life, which for me, once you realize that like what you're doing in deconstruction, pulling out this new data, analyzing it, and sort of incorporating it, you're going to be doing that forever. There's a little bit of a like relief factor, saying like, oh, if I'm going to do this forever, then I don't have to do it all today.
Yes.
Right.
In fact,
and so like we'll let it come as it comes, and we'll process it as it comes, and we're not going to feel overwhelmed, like, oh my gosh, everything's coming apart. Like, no, you've got a huge stack of stuff, and you're just going to take it one page at a time.
Oh my gosh. I just listened to a podcast today that was about me and several friends of mine who've been criticized a lot. Mm-hmm. And it was just so clear and they played clips of people criticizing us and then allowed us to respond, but it just struck me. There are people for whom, let's just talk about Christianity, people for whom Christianity is a set of beliefs, and you can number them. There might be 4, there might be 8, there might be 11 essential beliefs. And if you can at least say you believe those and convince yourself to believe those, then you're in, right? Here's the irony. When you go through this change, you might not be defined by your beliefs, but you might be defined by your desire for the truth. And there's a word for a person who is eager to learn the truth. And that word is a disciple. A disciple isn't a know-it-all. A disciple is a learner or a student. So for people to say, because I think we have built-in curiosity, and for people to say, you're allowed to be curious. You can follow truth wherever it leads you. You can welcome truth, whatever the source. And you also can say, I don't know. I don't have that figured out yet. I'm not even ready to have an opinion on it.
Right. I like what one of the viewers said in the chat. Her name's Beth, and she said, God made us in his image. He wants us to ask questions and be intelligent beings. I love that. And what you said just a moment ago, I think leads me to the last one of your books before we get back to Life After Doom, that I think, at least for the people who view my channel, I'm not talking about the ones who call me a false prophet 4 times before I wake up in the morning. Those people can go. We're fine with them. They believe the earth is flat anyway. But I mean, the rest of them, it's also another recent book of yours, but it just puts a real fine point on it. Do I stay Christian?
Yes.
It's perfect. It's like, especially because let me just spoiler alert. He doesn't just make an argument for staying Christian. Mm-hmm. Can you give us the 30,000 foot view?
Yeah. Well, okay, the first thing I should say is what led to that book was something that I'm sure you feel like 6 times a week at least,
Right.
which is when you watch what people who are identified as Christian leaders do and say, it just makes me think, do I really want to stay affiliated with this thing, right?
Oh, yeah. I need another. I often will say to people, I need another term to describe what I am believing and working with and what these other people are.
Yeah. But then if I could make an analogy, when I grew up as a little kid, they didn't tell me the truth about America, right?
Right. Oh, yeah.
And when I learned the truth about America, I asked myself, do I stay American? And so, and I think what happens for a lot of people with Christianity, they learn about Christian history. They learn what goes on behind the curtain with a lot of religious organizations and leadership. And so it's very natural for us to have this question, what do I want my identity to be? So what I did in the book had 3 movements or 3 parts. I took 10 chapters and gave the very best reasons I can think of not to stay Christian. And these are both my own and all of them are things that have affected me, but many of them other people really helped me to understand, or they'd be the number one issue for some other person. And then at the end of that, I said, well, are there reasons why you could have your eyes wide open to those 10 problems, not minimize them at all? Say, yes, those are every bit as bad as we've already said. And then still say, yes, I will stay a Christian. Here's how I will stay a Christian with those 10 issues in mind. And then at the end of that second part, I basically say, look, some people are going to stay Christian. Some people aren't. But you're going to have to wake up tomorrow and you're still a human being. What kind of human being do you want to be? And at the end of the day, I kind of think that's the really big question. In fact, if I could say it this way, I think Jesus would care a little bit more about that question. What kind of human being do you want to be than what religious label you wear? He was really like, what he one of his famous sayings is, you shall know a tree by its fruit. Or another place he says, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and don't do what I say? He's interested in how we live, and he's interested in helping us become the kind of people who live good lives. So that's what I focus on. Whether you decide to stay Christian or not, let's ask the question, how do we want to live?
Yeah. So Brian, again, thank you so much. And we'll see you online.
Okay. Keep up the great work. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
We do this stuff together in our community. It's called Not Church, and it's a community of people that are trying to engage in the spiritual work and spiritual life together, process our religious trauma, post funny memes, and be there for each other when things get difficult. And so we'll talk about podcast episodes like this. We will be there for each other. The reason we call it Not Church is because someone said it's like church. All the things you wanted from church, and nobody's telling you you're going to hell for believing the wrong things. If you want to be part of that community, patreon.com/skepticpastor. It's $3 a month. It's $3 a month because we're not going to ask you to give a percentage of your income. It's pay for what you get. So if it works for you, great. If it stops working for you, just stop paying. We've got funny, hilarious merch like I'm a deep skeptic, also a Christian. Take the Bible seriously, not literally. Some new things are coming on the horizon. NoomaCommunity.com/store, NOOMA community.com/store for that. And wherever you're listening to this podcast, give us a review. Give us all the stars. Actually post something nice. All of that really helps, especially the actual text reviews. We'd appreciate it. That's it. That's the podcast. Shout out to the Choir Network, to Patheos, to Matthew and Keith, who make everything happen. Now, get out of here. Go do something to make the world a better place. Okay? We'll see you next time.
All right. And